it's been. I'm driving home today. Hopefully I don't get lost this time. The last time I tried to drive home, I got lost temporarily. But I figured it out. It's probably okay. I'm actually driving home from a different place than usual. But anyways, today's topic. Everyone's favorite. Definitely not way over talked about. Definitely not way over joked about. Non-fungible tokens. I think that's right. Or whatever. NFTs. My man. Yeah. I mean, I talked a little bit about NFTs. I need to slow myself down. I've talked a little bit about NFTs on the normal podcast a little bit. And I think if I didn't make it super clear there, I want to re-stress that I don't really have strong feelings on cryptocurrency or NFTs either way. Generally how I approach things like that, even if something is horrendously toxic on the online environment or very negatively perceived, I generally take the approach that hey, I don't necessarily know anything about this thing. Something I do that I probably shouldn't is say I'm dumb about it or stupid, so I don't understand it. I don't think I'm a particularly dumb person or a particularly stupid person. I maybe lack some of the more normal common sense things I think some people have, but that's probably a lot just comes down to social awkwardness and anxiety to some degree, probably. Also, how I process some information, it can be a little weird at times. I have a hard time with certain tasks people ask me to do in terms of how to think about them, which probably should be very normal and easy for people to process. What is that problem? Don't diagnose me. I'll go to a doctor if I want to. Anyways, but yeah, NFTs are something that I have been very curious about to some degree. And like I said, I don't understand cryptocurrency super well or NFTs super well, so I don't want to sit here and act like I'm saying that anything I'm going to say means anything. I also don't necessarily need anyone to sit here and fact check me a bunch, although if you have thoughts and opinions on it, feel free to share it. Yeah, so I've been curious about it for a couple of reasons. One is that it is something that comes up as how can NFTs change gaming a lot, right? That's where I'm really most interested in NFTs and cryptocurrency or blockchain stuff. None of that has really crept its way into gaming that much outside of, I think occasionally you would hear of some Steam game that would secretly install crypto miners on your PC or something like that, right? So I think that was usually the kind of place you would hear that thing. But I think the harder thing to kind of envision, and that's not a good thing, that's a scam thing, right? Although some people would say all cryptocurrency is a scam. But the thing that I am waiting for is just finding or trying to understand is finding the tangible uses of NFTs in a game in a way that actually changes how a game is designed and how it functions and things like that. And I've asked this question around a few different people that I feel would have some interesting ideas. One person I asked is somebody I know, and they have very much kind of rode the NFT wave and have made way more money than I will ever make in my life because of it. And not just perceived value of thing. They have cashed out on it and have a lot of money. So a lot of real money from it. So whether that's a good or a bad thing is a whole other thing again. But I did talk to them a little bit because they are involved in NFTs in a game sense kind of thing. And when I sat down and looked at their game and what they're doing, and keep in mind I did not actually play it, so I don't really know the actual use case for it in that game 100%. What it seemed to really come down to in the current implementation that has was that it was really just a way to kind of add value to your gaming labor. It reminds me a little bit of the thing you would hear a lot about gamification of mundane tasks in your life that would be good to do, right? I remember gamification of toothbrushing, which is something that did happen with like Pokemon Brush or whatever, right? It would gamify this responsible task to build good habits and things like that. And it seems like in the case of NFTs, to my understanding, is that what you do in a game can help build the value of something because of how either you essentially trade up through NFTs or how your interaction and like adjustment of what this NFT is within this fictional world builds a more desirable aspect to this this thing that you have, right? And that really has been the main thing that I think I've been able to take away from what NFTs mean to gaming. However, the game I was looking at and talking to someone about was essentially the equivalent of like one of those Flash RPGs that you used to play. I think Adventure Quest is the one I used to play when I was a kid, where it is very much these kind of mundane click things and numbers go up, all that fun stuff, right? And hey, people love that. That is not something that I say that probably in a very negative way, but that is something that people love. Cookie Clicker is big because people like seeing the numbers go up, and there are good ways to make the numbers go up, and there are bad ways to make the numbers go up, right? Not every clicker is a huge success. There's good game design around clickers, right? That's a big thing. I say this all having never played a clicker, but I think at this point, clickers have been around and have evolved in such a way that some have risen to the top and some have fallen to the bottom, and a lot of them, you know, not always it's due to quality, right? But I imagine to some degree that is some of it, right? So it's something that I look at the game design part of it, and other than the fact that it builds value, I don't see how that affects how you actually interact with the game's world and things like that. Has been really probably the biggest challenge. And one of the most interesting things I think that I kind of take away from, and keep in mind, I am not doing a ton of like research on this stuff, so this is very much personal conversations I've had with people and looking at implementations again. So I'm not, again, I feel like I have to keep saying the caveat of like, I don't really know like how true all this is other than just my personal observing of these things. But one interesting thing that I talked to my dad about, particularly because my dad does dabble in the NFTs, he has made some money from it as well, is that he mentioned that people who play games to earn probably won't necessarily be the same people who play games for fun. And a big part of that, he said, was due to how earnings come in and how, depending on the scale of those earnings, you have legal things that come into play, right? So people are still trying to figure this stuff out, but as far as I understand, based off my conversations with him, you are still taxed for your earnings on that stuff, or at least you should be reporting them at this point. It sounds like the government wants you to, you know, whether or not you legally have to at this point, I don't know, but that is his understanding. Again, I don't know anything about anything, so don't worry too much about it if I'm wrong, or rather just don't like freak out about it. Anyways, so yeah, so he was just like, the people who are going to play to earn and be taxed by it probably won't want to navigate, like, you know, how difficult it would be to file taxes on this stuff in the short term. Now, obviously, there may be some situations where I think there are companies who handle those kind of things and would literally just give you what is essentially equivalent to like I think a W-2 is what it's called. You know, the business thing you get where you basically have a form you put in your tax information, and it basically, at least for me, like I shove it into TurboTax, and then TurboTax spits it out and it's like, you get this much money back kind of thing, or you owe this much money. So there's those kind of situations. And I imagine over time, if people really wanted to expand into that audience, that would be the smart thing to do. But he mentioned that he thinks, at least for now, those audiences are going to be, in some ways, two different sets of people. Obviously, the people who are playing them are both people who enjoy games, and that's why they would interact with this stuff. But I thought that was an interesting comment. And what really kind of made that, I don't know if solidifies the right word, maybe I was just kind of taken aback, was over the holidays, Square Enix had their like financial report thing that came out, and the Square Enix CEO came out and he more or less said the exact same thing about play like for fun audience being different from play to earn. So I think that's kind of like a fascinating part of it, that, you know, it maybe this is like very common language and I'm just not missing it, but that divide is just something I was not really expecting to, you know, hear about with NFTs. It does make sense, but I was surprised by that. So yeah, I mean, at some point, like if the mechanisms are the same, and if say a game is good enough that you're playing it, you know, and you get the choice between a game that is as good as, and you can earn money from playing it, versus not as good as, and you know, you don't earn money from playing it, then I could definitely see the appeal of that kind of thing. I think the thing I don't really believe in, and I think most people who understand how the game industry is today, or at least in the like the AAA modern market, is with like the idea that you'll carry a hat between 5 different games and it will be supported in each game and all that stuff. I think with the current development realities, that's not the case. Like people having their own engines and all that stuff. But I do maybe foresee a world where something like that could function if there is a continued like homogenization of like engines, like all going under Unity and all going under Unreal Engine. And again, I don't know what I'm talking about really, from like, I've never worked with those things. I don't know how easy it would be. I'm sure a lot of games have used the same engines but are completely incompatible. But I could see like if an engine is very prevalent, there may be a way that could be implemented across the board. Now that being said, you know, what incentive do companies have to do that? I don't know, and I don't think that's a realistic implementation, to be completely honest with you. It's just what the one justification I could think of how that would work, potentially, as somebody who does not make video games, right? But I personally think the carrying stuff like cosmetics between different games, to me, doesn't really seem that interesting. But I'm not a big cosmetic guy in games, and also my idea of cosmetics in games is very different than others. I typically like more normal kind of clothes in games. I'm not a huge fan of like fancy outfits and fancy hats and stuff like that. Not saying I won't use them, not saying I don't enjoy them, but I particularly prefer more normal clothes. And that can be period appropriate too, as well. It doesn't have to just be like t-shirts and stuff like that, right? Hey, by the way, confirmed, I did make it home properly this time. Congratulations to me. I'm not home yet, but I am at the point of, I probably first make sure I turn properly here. I probably won't get lost because it's basically just a straight drive back to my house. Anyways, but yeah, so I think NFTs are kind of interesting at this point. And if you are curious about like seeing kind of the both sides in NFTs, if you want to be a both sides person, it's a terrible life to live in some ways. Johnny Harris, I believe his name, is the same dude who did like the McDonald's ice cream machine video that got really popular, of why McDonald's ice cream machines are always broken. I like Johnny Harris's videos a lot. Out of like all the normal stuff I watch, I enjoy his like normal as in like not video game stuff. I really enjoy Johnny Harris's stuff. And he made a pretty good video that I think kind of compares the thought processes behind being pro NFT and anti NFT. So he does talk about NFTs and why they are valuable, or well, maybe not why they're valuable, but what the thought, like ideas behind them. But I think more importantly is he looks at the thought process of why people are on these different sides of NFTs. And I really enjoyed that video. And I think it's a good starting point for that thing, at least, right? I feel like I'm like sitting weird today in a way. Oh, that's because my chair's slid up. I don't know why that's the case. Maybe I slid it up for something else. I was like, my foot hurts from like driving for some reason. Anyways, so yeah, I mean, that's kind of really all I had to say about it, but it's just something I've been doing recently, thinking about. I don't think that's going to ever like come into channel content in any way, but you know, I'm not always about like, I think one of the problems with my channel is that I just like video games as a whole. And I like modern games, I'd say, as much as older games, honestly. Like, I always enjoy seeing what's next. I find that very exciting. And it can be hard to communicate that to people, though, because I just see a YouTube channel with a guy talking about old video games all the time, right? But there's only so much you can do, and I have my own thoughts of why I play old games. Maybe that will be a bonus podcast at some point, although I'm sure I've mentioned it many a time on my own here. So, but that will be all for today. At least I am driving in my parking spot, my gate as we speak. I just got a notification that my PC will be arriving tomorrow. I know I uploaded the PC Talk podcast pretty late. I had already bought a PC by the time I uploaded that. But I did finally buy a PC. So very happy about that. I don't really have plans to set it up yet because I was not expecting it to get here so soon. It was supposed to arrive after 2 months, and it's been maybe 2 to 3 weeks. So, hey, good on them for shipping it quickly, I guess, but we'll see if it actually arrives in one piece. I always hear I hear about people saying there are horror stories about pre-built PCs. I don't necessarily I have not heard of any too many particular individual stories from people I know about that. So, yeah. Anyways, thanks so much for coming. Again, thank you again for subscribing to the Patreon. I know it's been 2 podcasts in a row this week, but I wanted to get something up fairly quickly. I don't think I'll be doing a car talk podcast every single week I drive home from work, to be honest with you. But the last podcast I kind of galvanized and put on the main podcast. It was something that really needed to be talked about in a more public forum. So I think it was important that I did talk about it in that way, but I did feel a little bad because I did upload that as a bonus podcast and basically not only repeated what I said, but said it cleaner on the normal podcast. So here you go. I have been talking about NFTs on the podcast, but at least the bits and pieces about me, doing some conversations with people, talking, trying to understand it. That stuff probably won't show up in the show anytime soon, at least. So say that, but then next week, watch me blabber my mouth. I'm somebody who has a hard time, not talking. So I say as I sit here in my car after I said I was going to stop recording. So anyways, that's it. Thank you so much. Have a great time. Bye.